animated horror story?
The Blacksmith's Son and the Witch. Long ago, in a quiet village surrounded by thick forests and winding rivers, there lived a hard-working blacksmith. His name was Raghav, and though he was respected for his skill and honesty, he carried one heavy burden in his heart. His only son, Arav, was fragile and weak. From the day the boy was born, his health had worried the father. No medicine from the village doctor, no prayers at the temple, and no advice from the elders seemed to bring the child true strength. The boy often sat quietly, his small frame too weak to join the other children in play. Raghav, though deeply troubled, never stopped trying. Every night after finishing his work at the forge, he would sit by his son, feeding him warm food, telling him stories, and hoping that one day Arav would rise with the vigor of a young man. But fate had its own cruel plans. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the village settled into silence, an old woman appeared at Raghav's door. Her back was bent, her eyes glowed with a strange fire, and her voice carried both gentleness and danger. She claimed to know why the boy was weak and offered a solution. "Your son is not cursed," she said softly, "but his soul is bound by forces you do not understand. If you want him to survive, you must bring him to me." Though hesitant, Raghav's desperation overcame his doubt. With trembling hands, he agreed. The next day, he carried Arav to the woman's small hut at the edge of the forest. But as soon as they stepped inside, Raghav realized his mistake. The air grew heavy, the shadows moved unnaturally, and strange symbols covered the walls. The woman was no healer, she was a witch. She smiled cruelly and whispered incantations, binding Arav with ropes of smoke and shadow. Raghav tried to fight, but the more he struggled, the weaker he felt. "Your son's spirit belongs to me now," the witch hissed, "and with it, I shall gain eternal youth." Arav, though frail, saw the terror in his father's eyes and gathered what little courage he had. He remembered the stories his father told him about bravery and sacrifice. With all his strength, he shouted a prayer to the gods, his voice trembling but powerful enough to break the witch's spell for a moment. The ropes loosened, and Raghav pulled him free. The witch shrieked, her hut trembling as though the forest itself was angry. Fire leapt from the floor, and the walls shook. Raghav lifted Arav into his arms and fled into the night. Behind them, the witch's screams echoed like thunder, promising revenge. Though they escaped, the experience changed them forever. Arav was still weak, but the courage he had shown gave Raghav hope. "Strength is not only in the body," he told his son gently as they walked home. "It also lives in the heart. And yours, my boy, is stronger than any iron I could forge." From that day on, father and son lived not in fear of weakness, but with the belief that true power comes from love, courage, and the will to protect one another. In a remote kingdom, far away from bustling cities, there was a school unlike any other. This was no ordinary place of learning. It was said to be built upon land once touched by spirits and guarded by creatures unseen. Students were not only tested on knowledge of numbers and letters, but also on courage, wit, and their ability to face the unknown. Among these students was a boy named Arav, the son of the village blacksmith. Though his father had already faced dark forces once, Arav had grown older, and his curiosity often pulled him toward danger. When the day of the great examination arrived, he was both excited and nervous. The exam was not held inside classrooms, but deep within the forest that everyone feared. Teachers whispered that the test revealed a person's true nature, stripping away lies and exposing courage or cowardice. At dawn, the students gathered at the forest's edge. A heavy mist crawled across the ground, and strange whispers floated in the air, though no one could see where they came from. Each student was handed a scroll with strange symbols and a lantern that glowed with a pale blue flame. "Your path will be revealed," the examiner said, "but beware. The forest does not forgive weakness." As Arav stepped into the woods, the air grew colder. Shadows twisted between the trees, and the ground seemed to shift beneath his feet. Soon he realized he was alone, completely separated from the others. His lantern flickered, casting trembling light on roots that looked like clawing hands. The scroll in his hand changed before his eyes, the letters twisting into words only he could understand. Face the truth, or be consumed by the forest. He walked deeper until he reached a clearing where a woman stood. Her appearance was unsettlingly familiar, her crooked posture, glowing eyes, and cruel smile. It was the witch who once tried to steal his soul years ago. Arav froze, fear tightening his chest. "You escaped me once," she hissed, "but this time you will not leave." The witch raised her hand, and shadows leapt from the ground, wrapping around Arav like snakes. His lantern dimmed, and his strength drained away. For a moment, he almost surrendered to the darkness. But then he remembered his father's words. Strength lives not only in the body, but in the heart. Summoning every ounce of courage, Arav shouted a prayer, the same one he had cried as a child. His voice echoed through the forest, louder and braver than before. The lantern blazed with white light, burning away the shadows and forcing the witch to retreat with a shriek that shook the trees. Exhausted but alive, Arav staggered forward until the mist thinned and the forest opened into daylight. When he emerged, the examiners and students stared at him with awe. No one needed to ask what had happened. The forest itself had tested him, and he had passed. That day, Arav learned the truest lesson of all. Knowledge may guide you, but courage protects you. And some exams are not written on paper, but carved into the soul. It was long past midnight when the silence of the abandoned hospital became unbearable. The building had been closed for years, yet the corridors still carried the smell of disinfectant, mixed with damp rot. Only the faint buzz of broken fluorescent lights disturbed the heavy stillness. For most, this place was nothing more than a ruin. But for me, it was where the truth of old stories had to be faced. I was a medical student then, curious about the legends whispered by former nurses and guards. They spoke of a cursed wing, sealed after too many deaths occurred in one season. Patients had vanished, machines failed without reason, and one night, an entire ward of beds was found empty, though no one had seen the sick leave. No official record explained it, but everyone in town knew the place was haunted. My friends dared me to enter, and though fear gnawed at me, I accepted. At 2:47 a.m., I stood before the locked door of the ICU wing. The lock was rusted, yet strangely warm to the touch. When it finally gave way, the sound echoed like a scream down the empty hall. Inside, the air was colder, sharper, as though every breath I took was cutting into my chest. My flashlight flickered against peeling paint and long dead machines. I expected silence, but instead I heard a soft hum. Following it, I found the monitor of an old ICU bed still glowing faint green, its screen showing a heartbeat. I froze. The hospital had no power for years. Suddenly, the line on the monitor flatlined with a shrill beep. The sound echoed, bouncing off the walls until it became unbearable. Then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Someone or something was walking in the hall behind me. I turned, and at the far end of the corridor stood a figure. At first, it looked like a nurse in an old uniform, her cap tilted, her hands folded. But her face, it was featureless, a smooth, pale mask where eyes and mouth should have been. She raised one hand and pointed directly at me. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath turned to mist, my body frozen in terror. The machines around me suddenly whirred to life, screens flickering, alarms blaring, though no patients lay in the beds. Shadows twisted along the walls, stretching like skeletal fingers reaching out. I ran. My footsteps slammed against the tile, yet the sound of hers followed, always just behind me. No matter how fast I moved, the distance never changed. Her presence pressed against me like a suffocating weight. Just as I neared the exit, the lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed me. But then, in the silence, I remembered what my father once told me. Fear only has power if you let it. Closing my eyes, I forced myself to breathe slowly, to believe that the thing chasing me was nothing more than fear, made flesh. When I opened my eyes, the corridor was empty. The machines were dead once more. I stumbled into the night air, the hospital looming behind me like a corpse of brick and steel. I never went back, but I knew this. The stories were true. Some places do not heal. They remain.